Welcome back, everybody, to the exciting conclusion of solving polynomial equations by factoring, section or lesson 5.5. The first chunk of problems that we looked at were factoring trinomials that had, different forms in terms of the factors that we needed to solve from there. The next two problems, as you can see, we have two terms or we have binomials. When we have two terms or binomials, we want to be on the lookout for a difference of squares. And just again, as a quick reminder, difference of squares has that structure or that pattern. So the way I like to think about the difference of squares is we've identified that there are two terms, and we want to ask ourselves the question, are the terms perfect squares? And in this case, they are. The square root of x squared is equal to x, and the square root of 121 is equal to 11. And so because those are both perfect squares, separated by subtraction, we know that that's a difference of squares. And now, to finish solving the equation, all we have to do is set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So we're going to get x equals negative 11 and x equals positive 11. Moving on to the next problem. As always, we are going to concern ourselves with GCFs. And so if we have a greatest common factor here, we're going to take that out first, which is going to leave us with x to the fourth minus 16 in that quantity. And now what we want to do is examine what's left. Are these terms perfect squares? And the answer in this particular problem is yes. The square root of x to the fourth is x squared, and the square root of 16 is equal to 4. Now, this is one of those situations where one of the factors that we have left is, in fact, a difference of squares, and this came up yesterday in Mrs. Connor's video. And so we have two terms separated by subtraction. They are both perfect squares. Note, this factor is not, despite the fact that these are both perfect squares, it is a sum of squares, and there is no factorization pattern for an example like that. So what we now have are three separate factors for which we will need to solve. So we are going to set each of these equal to 0. We'll get the easy ones out of the way first. So we'll add 2 to both sides on this factor over here on the right. We'll subtract 2 from both sides for this factor here on the left. Now for this one here, we're going to subtract 4 first. And actually, in the previous video, we solved an equation exactly this exact same equation. So we're going to take the square root of both sides. Because we took the square root, we're going to include the plus or minus, excuse me. The square root of 4 is 2, and the square root of this negative, or that negative 1, is I. And so those would be the solutions to number